I can still see it clearly, as if it happened only a second ago. The crystal chandeliers of the Mayflower Hotel ballroom glowed above 100 guests. White roses shimmered in tall glass vases. Everyone was smiling, applauding, expecting a speech about love, endurance, and 25 years of marriage. Instead, my husband, Richard Lawson, gripped the microphone with steady hands and announced, "25 years is long enough. I want someone new, someone young. Grace, you need to be out of the condo by tomorrow." A gasp swept across the room. People turned in disbelief, some covering their mouths, others shaking their heads. At the front table, his mother, Margaret Lawson, sat upright, a satisfied smile tugging at her lips. She had known all along, but I did not cry. I did not collapse. Something inside me rose instead, something stronger than humiliation. I stood, took the microphone from Rick's hand, and said one line that left him frozen in place. "To understand how I got there, you have to go back 3 weeks." That was when the signs began. Small cracks opening in a marriage. I thought I knew. It started late at night, around 3 in the morning. I woke to hushed voices outside our bedroom door. I stayed still, barely breathing, listening through the silence. "We have to do this right," Rick whispered. "She won't suspect a thing." And then a woman's voice, sharp and certain. "Of course not, son." It was Margaret, my mother-in-law. My stomach tightened. What could they possibly be plotting in secret? And why now, with our silver anniversary approaching? The wooden floor creaked as Rick slipped back into the bedroom. I shut my eyes, pretending to be asleep. He lay down carefully, but his body was stiff, restless. I caught the faint scent of an expensive cologne I had never smelled on him before. The next morning he was different, too affectionate, too cheerful. He kissed my cheek, called me my love, and suggested we pick a restaurant for the big celebration. For 25 years, planning family events had been my responsibility. He only ever criticized. Now he was suddenly enthusiastic. "Fine," I answered, forcing a smile while studying his every move. He rushed off to work, leaving his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a reminder, "Call S at 1100 a.m. When he came home later, I asked casually, "Who's S in your contacts?" He froze for a split second. I saw panic flash in his eyes before he smoothed it away. "Ah, Sanchez," he said. "A colleague from Seattle, just work stuff." But I knew better. Rick has a tell whenever he lies. His left eye twitches. And right then, it twitched twice. I carried on watering the plants by the window, pretending not to notice. But inside my chest tightened. Something was wrong. Rick and I had met in college. I was the serious accounting student. He was the charming young manager climbing the corporate ladder. We married with dreams of children, of a house full of laughter. But children never came. Doctors said nothing was wrong. But no miracle arrived. Rick took it hard. Margaret made it worse. She was the type of woman who wrapped her criticisms in polite phrases. "Some women are just meant to be mothers," she would say, tilting her head with a smile. "It is such a shame." Over the years, her words turned from whispers to permanent cracks in our marriage. Still, I thought Rick and I had found peace. We traveled. We advanced in our careers. We built a comfortable life. But that morning, with his sudden affection and his secret S, I realized something had shifted far deeper than I had admitted. Later that week, there was a knock on my door. Margaret stepped in without waiting for an invitation. Just as she always did. "Grace, dear," she said sweetly, "how are the preparations going for the party?" "Rick wants to host it at a restaurant," I replied, leading her into the living room. "Good," she said brightly. "Such an important milestone deserves a proper venue." Her eyes wandered around the room, examining every detail as if comparing it to her larger suburban mansion. Then she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that cut sharper than words. "By the way, Grace," she said, settling into an armchair, "have you thought about the future? Rick is 53 now, without grandchildren. Well, don't you think it would be wise to make a will for the children? My nephews are good boys. If we don't plan, the government will take everything." I placed my teacup gently on the table. "What children?" "Margaret. Rick and I never had any." "Well, My nephews, she said, waving her hand as if it were obvious. Young, ambitious boys. They could use a start in life. Then, almost casually, she asked, "And where do you keep the condo papers?" My chest went cold. "They're in the safe," I said flatly. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just in case," she replied smoothly. "You never know what might happen. It's good to know where things are." That was when the puzzle began to come together. The midnight phone call, Rick's sudden sweetness, and Margaret's questions about the deed. Piece by piece, I could see the picture forming, and I did not like what I saw. I smiled politely until she left, then sat alone in silence. For the first time in years, I wondered if my marriage was not just fragile, but already broken. After Margaret left that day, I sat in silence staring at the safe in the hallway closet. Her question about the condo papers was not casual. She wanted information, and I knew it. The next morning, Rick was gone before sunrise. He said he had an early meeting, but the scent of unfamiliar cologne lingered in the room. I poured coffee, sat by the window, and told myself to stay calm. By mid-morning, the phone rang. It was my friend Rachel Porter. Her voice was tense. "Grace, I just saw Rick," she said. "Where?" I asked, gripping the phone. "At Tyson's Galleria. In the jewelry store. He was with a young blonde woman. She looked about 30. Well-dressed. Expensive coat. They were holding hands and looking at rings. I am so sorry." The words cut through me like ice. My husband, days before our 25th anniversary, buying rings with another woman. "Thank you, Rachel," I said. My voice was steady though, my chest felt like it might crack. "I will handle it." After hanging up, I walked straight to Rick's study. He had always used simple passwords, but now his usual codes failed. I tried our wedding date reversed, and the computer unlocked. The browser history told me everything: how to divorce when assets are shared, legal advice on pressuring a spouse to sign away property, how to keep the condo in a divorce. Each search was like a dagger. He was not only betraying me, he was preparing to rob me. I closed the laptop quickly when I heard the door open. Rick walked in with a bouquet of roses and a glossy box of chocolates. "For my one and only true love," he said, pressing a kiss to my lips. I forced a small smile. "Thank you. We need to talk about our future." His shoulders stiffened. He turned on the television, his eyes on the screen. "Let us not ruin the party. We can talk after the celebration." After the celebration, that was his timeline. Later that evening, I checked our joint account. More than $30,000 had disappeared in transfers and purchases, jewelry, luxury stores, and large cash withdrawals. He was spending our money to plan my downfall. Instead of despair, I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest. He thought he held every card. He did not know I had my own secret. A week earlier, a letter had arrived from Germany. My Aunt Eleanor Brooks had passed away. She left me her entire estate. A condo in Munich, another in Miami Beach, and over $1 million in savings. The total value exceeded $3 million. I had not told Rick. My plan was to surprise him on our anniversary. Now it would be my protection. I placed the inheritance documents carefully in my drawer. For the first time since hearing Margaret's whispers, I felt a surge of strength. They wanted to trap me, but they had awakened someone who no longer feared them. That night, Rick climbed into bed, smelling of the same strong cologne. He kissed my shoulder. "Grace," he whispered, "this anniversary will be unforgettable." I smiled into the dark. Yes, unforgettable, but I knew our meanings were not the same. The morning after I discovered the bank withdrawals, I woke with a heavy feeling in my chest. It was not grief anymore. It was focus. If Rick and Margaret were planning a trap, I had to be ready before they struck. I called an old friend, Monique Harris. We had met in college. She was now a respected family attorney downtown. My voice was calm when I asked if she had time to meet. She said yes without hesitation. By 6 that evening, I was sitting in her office on the 15th floor of a glass tower. Monique greeted me with a warm hug, but her eyes quickly narrowed when she saw the tension in my face. "Grace, what is going on?" she asked. I sat across from her desk and placed my hands together. "Let us say a friend of mine is having trouble. Her husband is planning to leave her, but he is also trying to take her assets. He has his mother and a lawyer helping him. What can she do?" Monique leaned back. studying me. Is this friend you? Grace. I lowered my gaze. Silence was my answer. She leaned forward again. All right, tell me everything from the beginning. So I told her. I described the midnight phone calls, the browser searches, the mysterious S, and the $30,000 missing from our account. I told her about Margaret asking about the condo deed, and about the inheritance letter from Germany. Monique listened carefully, taking notes on a yellow pad. She asked questions only to clarify details. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the desk. This is serious, she said, but you are not powerless. First, the condo. You said your parents paid for it. Yes, the money came directly from them. Rick's name was added later, but the initial purchase was from my parents' account. Then that condo may be considered a premarital gift. We need documents proving it was given to you before his name was added. Find the old deed. A lawyer who handled the purchase should have the records, Tekrid and Bine. I felt a wave of relief. That would make it mine alone. In most cases, yes. Unless Rick can prove he invested in major renovations. Did he? No. I paid for every repair myself. Good. Next. The inheritance. Property and money you receive from a relative are considered separate property unless you mix them into joint accounts. Do not tell Rick about it. Keep all documents secure. I nodded firmly. Third, gather evidence. Screenshots of messages. Photos of browser history. Any recordings you can make. The more proof you have of his intent, the stronger your position. I took a deep breath. And what about the public humiliation he is planning? I can feel it. He wants to make a scene at the anniversary party. Monique's eyes hardened. That is a manipulation tactic. He wants you emotional, so you sign papers under pressure. Do not give him that power. Stay calm. If he tries anything in public, you respond with facts, not tears. Her words lit something inside me. For weeks, I had felt cornered. Now I realized I could fight back. Thank you, I said softly. How much do I owe you for the consultation? Monique smiled. Nothing. We are friends. Just promise me you will not let them break you. You are stronger than you think. When I left her office, the city lights glowed across the skyline. I walked down the street with a new determination. The next day I visited the office of Samuel Green, the real estate lawyer who had helped us buy the condo years ago. His secretary led me into his book-lined office. Mr. Green, now older with silver hair, remembered me right away. Grace Mitchell. It has been a long time, he said warmly. And how is Rick? I forced a polite smile. That is exactly why I am here. I need to review the original deed of the condo. Do you still have the records? He opened a large file cabinet and began flipping through folders. After a few minutes, he pulled out a thick file and set it on the desk. He put on his glasses and scanned the pages. Here it is. The money for the purchase came from the Mitchell family account. You were listed as sole recipient. Rick's name was added 2 months later after your marriage. A tightness in my chest released. So legally it is a premarital asset. Yes, unless your husband can prove he invested in it, which you say he did not. You should request a certified statement from me. It will help in case of divorce proceedings. Please prepare one, I said without hesitation. He nodded. It will be ready tomorrow. When I walked out of his office into the crisp air, I felt taller, lighter. For the first time in days, I was not afraid. I had proof, allies, and a plan. That evening, Rick came home later than usual. He smelled again of the cologne that was not his. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Everything is ready. The anniversary will be unforgettable." I smiled politely and looked him in the eyes. Yes, it will. Inside. Though, I was no longer the wife waiting helplessly for betrayal. I was a woman preparing for a battle she intended to win. The following Saturday morning I woke early, determined to keep my focus sharp. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, writing down every piece of evidence I had gathered so far. The computer searches and wife, the missing money, the call from Rachel about the jewelry store, the deed from Mr. N.O. Green, the inheritance papers. I was building a case, piece by piece, like a puzzle that showed the truth. Around 9, the phone rang. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. It was Rachel again. "Grace, I thought you should know something," she said. "I saw Rick again yesterday. Same woman. They were at a restaurant in Georgetown. She was sitting right next to him, touching his arm, laughing. Everyone in the place noticed. What did she look like this time? I asked. She wore a red coat and diamond earrings. Very polished. Very sure of herself. She introduced herself to the waiter as Tiffany. The name stung. Tiffany. I repeated it silently, as if tasting the bitterness on my tongue. Now the S in his phone made sense. It was not Sanchez. It was Sierra Tiffany Clark, the woman who had replaced me in Rick's life. Thank you, Rachel. I said. You have helped me more than you know. After the call, he sat still, letting the anger settle into cold resolve. If Rick thought he could parade Tiffany around town without consequences, he was mistaken. Later that morning, Margaret showed up unannounced, as usual. She carried a paper bag with pastries from her favorite bakery. She set them on the counter with a sweet smile, as if she were the generous hostess. Grace, dear, she began, I hope you are preparing yourself for next week. Rick has been working so hard. The guest list is impressive. The ballroom will be beautiful. I am proud of him. I raised an eyebrow. $45,000 for one evening is excessive. He should be saving, not showing off. She waved her hand dismissively. It is an investment. People must see that you two are successful. Appearances matter. I wanted to laugh at the hypocrisy. This party was not about appearances for me. It was about humiliation. They wanted to corner me in public, break me, so I would sign whatever papers they pushed across the table. Margaret, I asked evenly, what exactly do you hope to accomplish with this party? Her smile froze for half a second, then returned. Why? Celebration. Of course. What else? I let the silence linger until she grew uncomfortable. Then I said, if there is one thing I have learned in this marriage, it is that appearances never tell the whole story. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. That afternoon, while Rick was gone, I checked his jacket pockets. Inside one, I found a crumpled business card. Thomas Alvarez, Family Law, Divorce and Property Division. I stared at the name. This was the lawyer Margaret had mentioned in her late-night call, so it was all true. They had already prepared the legal side. Papers were likely waiting for me. That night, Rick came home carrying more shopping bags. He looked pleased with himself, humming as he set the bags down. What is all this? I asked. Just a few things for the party, he said. New tie, cufflinks, shoes. I want to look my best. I crossed my arms. You are certainly putting on a show. He gave me a quick kiss. Do not worry, Grace. Everything is under control. As he walked into the bedroom, I stood there watching his back. Control. He thought he was in control, but I had my documents safely hidden. I had my lawyer ready. He did not know that his plan was about to collapse in front of everyone. The following day, I went to the Mayflower Hotel myself. I told the event manager I wanted to see the ballroom for our anniversary. She smiled and showed me inside. The room was grand, with crystal chandeliers and mirrored walls that reflected the long tables dressed in white. At the center stood a microphone on a polished stand. Your husband requested this spot, the manager explained. He wanted to be sure everyone could hear his speech clearly. Of course he did. He wanted every guest to witness my humiliation. How much did this cost? I asked. $45,000, she said proudly. The best of everything. I nodded slowly. Yes, unforgettable. When I returned home, Rick was in the living room rehearsing lines under his breath. I listened from the hallway. Dear friends, he murmured, today I must be honest. 25 years ago I made a mistake. Grace is a good woman, but not the right partner for me. It is time to move forward. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to keep listening. Honesty demands I begin a new life. I thank her for the years, but it is over. I stepped away quietly. He was practicing how to discard me like an old coat. He did not know that I would be ready with my own speech. That evening, I pulled the folder from my drawer and laid out the documents on the table. The deed showing the condo was mine. The certified statement from Mr. Sevenin, Green. The inheritance papers from Germany. The bank account records, those elusive. Each page was a shield. Together, they were a sword. Rick thought the party would be his stage. Instead, it would become mine. The week before the anniversary moved quickly. But every day I felt sharper, steadier. I was no longer the woman lying awake in fear. I was building a strategy. And for once, Rick was the one who would be caught off guard. On Monday, I met Monique again. Her office felt like a safe haven, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and polished wood. She welcomed me in with a smile but saw the determination in my eyes. "Grace, you look different," she said. "Like you know exactly what you are going to do." "I do," I replied, "but I need to make sure I am legally bulletproof before that night." I spread the documents across her desk. The certified deed from Mr. the Nader, and a 5-year-old Green, the inheritance papers from Germany, and the new account I had opened in my name. Monique's eyes lit with approval. "This is excellent. You have every piece of proof you need. No court will take the condo from you, and the inheritance is entirely yours. Keep it separate, and Rick cannot touch it." "What about the party?" I asked. "He plans to announce the divorce there, with his mother and Tiffany standing in the shadows. He wants me broken, embarrassed, so I will sign whatever Hayes or Alvarez put in front of me." Monique leaned forward. "Then you must not show fear. The moment he tries to humiliate you, you respond with truth. If you reveal what you know, his plan collapses. But you must keep your composure. Do not scream. Do not cry. Just facts." Her voice was calm, but I felt the fire in her words. "I can do that," I whispered. "Good." "And Grace, one more thing. Record everything you can that night. Phones are always watching, but make sure you have your own record. If he tries to twist the story later, the truth will already be out there." I nodded firmly. "Thank you, Monique. You have no idea how much this means." She smiled warmly. "Actually, I do. I have seen too many women cornered by lies. You are not going to be one of them." Leaving her office, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. The next day, I visited the bank again to finalize the transfer of part of my inheritance into a private account. The young banker looked at the numbers, wide-eyed, and said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Mitchell. You are in a very strong position." "Yes," I said softly, "stronger than anyone knows." When I got home that evening, Rick was unusually cheerful. He placed a bouquet of roses on the counter, as if we were still newlyweds. "For my beautiful wife," he said. "Next week will be unforgettable." I forced a smile. "Unforgettable." "Yes." Inside, I wanted to laugh. He was preparing to deliver the blow of his life, unaware that I already held the blade that could cut his schemes apart. Margaret stopped by the following afternoon. She carried a garment bag with what she called a suitable dress for me to wear. "I thought you might need help looking your best," she said, hanging the bag on the closet door. I opened it. It was pale gray, shapeless, more like a uniform than an evening gown. Margaret's choice, not mine. "Thank you," I said coolly, "but I already have something planned." Her lips tightened, but she did not argue. Instead, she said, "You know, Grace, it is important to accept when life changes. My son deserves happiness, and you should not make it difficult for him. Sometimes the best thing a wife can do is step aside gracefully." I met her gaze directly. "Do not worry, Margaret. I will handle myself with grace." She left without another word. That night I laid out my own dress. It was navy blue, elegant and strong. A dress that did not whisper apology but spoke confidence. I imagined myself standing at the microphone, looking Rick straight in the eyes, and showing the truth to everyone. On Thursday, I called Rachel. "Would you be willing to come to the anniversary party?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "Do you need me to do anything?" "Just be there, and if things unfold the way I expect, back me up. People will need to hear it from more than just me. You have my word." By Friday evening, I had everything ready. The folder of documents was in my purse. My phone was charged. Voice recorder app set to run. My dress was hanging in the closet. My lawyer knew every detail. My friend Rachel knew enough to support me. And I knew in my heart that I was prepared. Rick came home late again, humming a tune as if life was perfect. He poured himself a drink and said, "Grace, I cannot wait for tomorrow. Finally, everyone will know the truth. I will be free." I looked at him across the room. "Yes, Rick. Tomorrow everyone will know the truth." I I turned away before he could see the small smile tugging at my lips. Tomorrow was no longer his stage. Tomorrow was mine. The evening of our silver anniversary arrived, and I felt an odd sense of calm. For weeks I had lived with tension pressing on my chest. Tonight, the fear was gone. My navy blue dress fit perfectly, and when I looked in the mirror I saw not a woman being cast aside, but a woman ready to fight back. Rick paced the living room before we left, adjusting his tie again and again. His hands trembled even though he tried to hide it. "Are you ready, Grace?" he asked. I lifted my purse, heavy with the folder of documents. "Yes, I am ready." The ride to the hotel was quiet. Rick drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, humming nervously. I stared out the window at the lights of the city, remembering the same drive 25 years ago, to our wedding. Then, silence was filled with hope. Tonight, silence was filled with war. The Mayflower Hotel sparkled with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests were already gathering in the ballroom when we arrived. Tables glowed with candles, and the scent of roses filled the air. "Grace, you look stunning," one of my coworkers said as I walked in. I smiled and thanked her. My heart was steady. At the far end of the room I spotted Tiffany. She wore a red silk dress that clung to her frame, her blonde hair perfect, her smile bright. She moved among the guests as if she belonged. Margaret stood near her, whispering and nodding with approval. I took my seat at the head table next to Rick. He lifted his glass in greeting, and guests applauded. My smile never faltered. Inside, I waited for the moment I knew was coming. Dinner passed in a blur. I barely tasted the food. My eyes moved from Tiffany to Margaret to Rick's hand clutching his speech. The room hummed with laughter and conversation, but beneath it all, I felt the sharp edge of betrayal waiting to slice through the air. Finally, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Rick Mitchell would like to say a few words." The room quieted. Rick rose, smiling broadly, his speech in hand. He cleared his throat and began. "Dear friends, tonight is a special night. 25 years with one person is no small thing. I thank you for joining us to celebrate this milestone." Guests clapped politely. He raised his hand for silence. But tonight is not only about the past. It is also about the future. And I must be honest with all of you. For 25 years I shared my life with Grace. She is a good woman. But we are different people now. What seemed right in our youth has become a mistake. Gasps rippled across the room. My boss frowned, shaking his head. Rick pressed on. "It is time to move forward. I am filing for divorce. Grace will leave the condo, and we will divide assets fairly. I have the right to be happy, and I will begin a new chapter with someone who understands me." He glanced at Tiffany, who lowered her lashes and smiled. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. Some stared at me, waiting for tears or rage. Rick looked proud, convinced he had broken me. I rose slowly and placed my hand on the microphone. "Thank you, Rick," I said softly, very honest. The room went silent again. Every eye turned to me. "You are right about one thing," I continued. "It is time for the truth, and here it is. I have known about your affair with Tiffany for weeks. I know about the $30,000 you took from our account. I know about the loans you hid. I know about the lawyer waiting to pressure me into signing away my rights." Rick's face drained of color. Tiffany stiffened, her smile collapsing. Margaret's hands clenched on her wine glass. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. "What you did not count on was my preparation. This condo you want so badly is not yours. My parents purchased it in my name before you were ever added. I have the deed and a certified statement from the lawyer who handled it." I held up the document as gasps echoed around the room. "And 3 weeks ago," I added, "my aunt passed away in Germany. She left me more than $3 million in property and accounts. I did not tell you, Rick, because I wanted to see your true colors first. Now I know them." The room was utterly still. Then murmurs rose like a storm. Rick tried to grab the microphone. "Grace, this is nonsense. Do not listen to her. She is twisting everything." I stepped back, voice steady. "No, Rick, I am simply telling the truth. And the truth is that you wasted $45,000 of our savings on this party just to humiliate me. Instead, you humiliated yourself." Gasps turned into open outrage. Guests whispered, shook their heads. Some even shouted. My boss rose and pointed at Rick. This is shameful. I will not forget what I witnessed tonight. Tiffany rushed to Rick's side. Is it true? You promised me that condo. Rick, you told me we would live there by New Year's. Quiet, he hissed, but she pulled away. You fool. She spat, her voice rising so everyone could hear. You spent my time, my dignity, and your wife's money, and now you have nothing. Margaret tried to stand tall, but her voice shook. Grace, surely we can resolve this privately. I looked at her evenly. No, Margaret. Some truths deserve the light. Tonight everyone knows who you are and who your son is, and tomorrow, I will file for divorce. I set the microphone down and walked toward the exit. Behind me voice rose. Phones clicked, and chaos spread like wildfire. Outside the ballroom I inhaled the cool night air. For the first time in years, I felt free. The moment I stepped out of the ballroom, the night air wrapped around me like freedom. For a brief second, I closed my eyes and savored it. But behind the doors I had just left, chaos was unfolding. I could still hear the rise of angry voices. Rick, are you insane? One guest shouted. You humiliated your wife in front of all of us. Another yelled, 25 years of marriage, and this is how you treat her. I turned back just long enough to glimpse through the glass doors. Rick stood frozen with the microphone at his feet, pale and sweating. Tiffany clutched his arm, demanding answers. Margaret's face was stiff, as if her years of control had cracked in one single night. I walked away, heels clicking against the marble floor, and stepped outside into the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But the fallout had only begun. Inside, Tiffany's voice rose higher. You told me you had everything handled. Rick, you promised me that condo. You promised me her money. Was it all a lie? Rick grabbed her wrist. Lower your voice. She yanked her arm free. Do not tell me to lower my voice. You used me. Rick, you bought me jewelry with your wife's money, took me to restaurants with her savings, and promised me a life you could not deliver. Gasps circled the room. Several guests pulled out their phones. I knew what that meant. By morning, the world would know. Margaret tried to take control. Enough. This family matter should not be discussed here. But one of my co-workers, Marina, stepped forward. No, Margaret. Grace deserves to have people hear the truth. You encouraged your son's betrayal. You stood by and let him destroy his marriage. Margaret's eyes blazed. You know nothing about our family. Maybe not, Marina replied. But I know integrity when I see it. And you do not have it. Meanwhile, Rick's boss, Mr. Collier, rose from his table. His face was red with fury. Rick Mitchell, after tonight, we will be reviewing your future with this company. Your behavior is disgraceful. If you cannot manage your household, how can I trust you to manage millions in client assets? Rick stammered. Please, let me explain. This is not what it looks like. It is exactly what it looks like. Mr. Collier said sharply. I have no respect for a man who betrays his wife and flaunts it in public. Guests began leaving in waves, murmuring their disgust. Some shook my hand as they passed me outside, whispering words of support. Others clapped my shoulder and said, Good for you. Grace, you stood tall. The scandal had legs. Phones had recorded Tiffany's outburst, Rick's confession, and my calm revelation of the truth. I knew by morning it would be everywhere. As I waited for a taxi, I overheard two women walking by. Can you believe it? A man betrays his wife at their own anniversary party, and she turned it all around on him. People need to hear stories like that. The other said, Women have to know they are not powerless. The taxi pulled up, and I climbed in. As the car rolled through the streets, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages from friends and coworkers. Words like proud, incredible, brave filled the screen. I smiled quietly to myself. At that same moment, Rick was still inside the ballroom, his life unraveling. Tiffany had turned her fury on him. You wasted my time. She spat. Do you think I will stay with you after this? You are broke, humiliated, and soon to be unemployed. Find another fool. Rick. She stormed out, heels clicking, leaving him standing alone. Margaret tried to comfort him, but even she could not mask her anger. You told me Grace would fold, she hissed. You told me we would have the condo, that the lawyer had everything in place. Now I am the one who looks like a fool. Mother, please. Rick begged. No, she said coldly. This time you dragged us both down. By the time the last guest left, Rick stood alone in the ballroom, surrounded by half-eaten food and abandoned glasses of champagne. The celebration had become a funeral for his reputation. Back at home, I poured myself a glass of tea and sat on the balcony. The city glowed beneath me. My documents were still safe in my purse, but I no longer needed them tonight. My strength had come from something deeper. I thought of the 25 years I had given Rick, the trips, the laughter, even the struggles. It had not all been wasted. Those years had taught me endurance. They had taught me how to recognize lies and how to rise when someone tried to break me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Rachel. Grace, I am so proud of you. The whole room saw the truth. Videos are already online. People are calling Rick a traitor. Thank you, Rachel, I said. But tonight was not about revenge. It was about freedom. When I hung up, I leaned back and let the night air brush against my face. The storm had broken, but I was still standing. Rick thought the anniversary would end my story. Instead, it became my beginning. The morning after the anniversary, I woke with sunlight pouring through the curtains. For a moment, I almost thought it had all been a dream. Then my phone buzzed, and reality hit me like a tidal wave. There were dozens of messages. Friends, coworkers, even distant cousins had all seen the videos. Clips of Rick's speech and Tiffany's meltdown were spreading across social media. The hashtag Silver Anniversary Scandal was trending. I scrolled through the comments. Some praised my composure. Others mocked Rick's arrogance. A few people expressed shock that anyone could betray his wife so publicly. My name was everywhere. So was his? Rachel called within the hour. Grace, are you seeing this? You are an icon now. Women are sharing your story everywhere. They are saying you gave them courage. I rubbed my forehead. I did not set out to be anyone's example. I only wanted the truth to be heard. Sometimes the truth becomes bigger than us. Rachel said, do not fight it. Let it inspire people. Her words stayed with me the rest of the morning. By noon, Rick's downfall had already begun. I heard from one of his colleagues that his boss, Mr. Collier, had called him in for a meeting. The company could not risk keeping him in a leadership position after such a public scandal. Later that day, I saw him walking down the street outside our condo. His shoulders were hunched, his suit wrinkled. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. People turned their heads as he passed, whispering and pointing. His face was now recognizable for all the wrong reasons. Margaret called me that evening. Her voice, once full of pride, now sounded desperate. Grace, please, can we talk? Rick made mistakes, but he is still family. We can fix this. No, Margaret, I said firmly. You planned this with him. You wanted me gone. Now you must live with the consequences. Her voice cracked. You do not understand. I put my own house up for collateral to pay the lawyer. If Rick loses his job, we will both be ruined. That was your choice, I replied. You gambled on my destruction. You lost. I hung up before she could respond. That night I sat at the kitchen table and spread out the documents again. The deed, the inheritance papers, the bank statements. They were more than proof. They were my shield and my freedom. 2 days later, I filed for divorce with Monique by my side. The clerk at the courthouse stamped the papers, and I felt an invisible chain break inside me. For 25 years I had carried the weight of Rick's ego and Margaret's disdain. Now I carried only my own name. The following week was brutal for Rick. Videos of Tiffany shouting at him were replayed endlessly. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as the downfall of a corporate executive undone by greed and betrayal. Tiffany herself disappeared from the picture. I later heard she moved on quickly, attaching herself to another wealthy man who owned a chain of restaurants. Rick was left alone to deal with the wreckage. At work, he was stripped of his position and asked to resign. Mr. Collier made it clear that the company could not afford the scandal. Without his salary and with loans piling up, Rick was drowning. Meanwhile, I felt a growing peace. I moved money from my inheritance into accounts that would keep me secure for the rest of my life. I began planning what to do next. One evening, Rachel came over with a bottle of wine. We sat on the balcony. the city lights glowing below us. "You look different," she said. "Not just free, but alive." "I feel alive," I told her. For years I accepted less than I deserved. Now I am starting to imagine a future on my own terms. "Have you thought about what comes next?" she asked. "Yes. I want to open a small publishing house. Books have always been my passion. I have the resources now, and I want to build something meaningful." Rachel raised her glass. "To new beginnings." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I laughed without pain. The next morning, a letter arrived from the German consulate. It confirmed the transfer of funds from my aunt's estate and the full legal registration of the Miami Beach condo. I held the papers in my hand, smiling. This was real. I was no longer tied to Rick's mistakes. Later that week, I saw him one last time outside the courthouse. He looked thin, his hair grayer than ever. He stopped when he saw me. "Grace," he said quietly, "I wanted to tell you I am sorry. I ruined everything." I studied his face. For a moment, I almost felt pity, but then I remembered the lies, the humiliation, the cruelty. "You made your choices," I said. "Now you live with them." I turned and walked away. Each step felt lighter, stronger. The scandal had destroyed him. But for me, it had opened a door to freedom. Weeks passed after the divorce filing, and every day brought more evidence of how far Rick had fallen. What once seemed impossible to me, seeing him stripped of power and confidence, was now reality. His face became familiar for all the wrong reasons. Online, people still shared clips from the anniversary. They replayed Tiffany's rage, Margaret's disbelief, and my calm revelation. The comments were brutal. Strangers mocked Rick as a man who tried to betray his wife and lost everything. I heard from colleagues at Alliance Development that Rick was no longer welcome in the corporate world. His boss had been clear. The company would not risk its reputation by keeping him. Other firms knew the story, too. No one wanted to hire him. His name had become poison. Margaret called me again. This time her voice was bitter instead of pleading. "You ruined him," she accused. "My son gave you 25 years, and you destroyed his life." "Margaret," I replied calmly. "He destroyed his own life. He lied, cheated, and plotted against me. All I did was tell the truth." She hung up without another word. I knew she was angry, not only because of Rick's downfall, but because she had lost her own security. She had put her house up for collateral, and now she faced losing it. Rick himself tried to reach out once. I met him outside the courthouse after a hearing. His suit no longer fit. His shoes were scuffed. He looked older than his years. "Grace," he said, his voice low, "I know you hate me, but I need help. The loans are crushing me. Tiffany is gone. I have nothing left." I stared at him, remembering the man who once planned my public humiliation like it was a stage play. "You still have your mother," I said quietly. "Lean on her, the way you always have. Please, Grace," he whispered. "I made mistakes. I do not deserve to end like this." I shook my head. "You deserve exactly what you earned." I turned and walked away, my heels steady on the courthouse steps. His voice followed me, but I did not look back. While Rick spiraled, I began building something new. The Miami Beach condo became my retreat. I visited it one weekend, walking through the spacious rooms with their wide windows overlooking the ocean. I stood on the balcony as the sun set, painting the sky gold, and I thought, this is mine. This is freedom. Back in Washington, I resigned from my job at Alliance Development. Mr. Collier tried to persuade me to stay. "You are the best controller we have ever had," he said. "We can give you a raise, more responsibility." I smiled. "Thank you, but I need to follow a different path. My aunt left me the resources to pursue my dream. I want to start a publishing house." He shook my hand firmly. "Then I wish you nothing but success. You have earned it." Within weeks, I rented a small office and hired 2 assistants, young women eager to learn. We focused on translating European literature into English, bringing forgotten voices to new readers. Each day I felt alive in ways I had not in years. Rachel visited one afternoon and looked around the office. Stacks of manuscripts sat on the desks. A whiteboard listed upcoming releases. "This is incredible. Grace," she said. "You built this out of ashes." I laughed softly. No. I built it out of truth. The ashes belong to Rick. She grinned. Either way, you are proof that a woman can rise after betrayal. Her words touched me deeply. For years, I had felt invisible in my own marriage, overshadowed by Rick's ambitions and Margaret's scorn. Now, I was the author of my own life. News of Rick's decline continued to reach me. He had sold his car and was driving an old Camry he bought cheap. He picked up passengers as a taxi driver at night. Neighbors whispered that he and Margaret had moved into a small apartment after she lost her house. One evening, as I walked home from my office, I saw him across the street. He was dropping off a passenger. His shoulders slumped. Our eyes met for a brief second. Shame filled his expression. I kept walking. There was nothing left to say. At night, in my condo, I sometimes thought about those 25 years. I did not deny that there had been love once. There had been laughter, plans, and dreams. But in the end, Rick chose greed and betrayal. That choice had cost him everything. It had given me something unexpected, a chance to start over. 3 months after the party, my first book release sold out its small print run. Readers praised the translation and the courage of a tiny press to take risks. I celebrated with my team, raising glasses of sparkling water. To truth, I said, and to building something better. As I clinked glasses with them, I realized I no longer carried bitterness. I carried hope. Rick was fading into obscurity. I was rising into my own light. 6 months after the anniversary, my life looked nothing like the one I had lived for 25 years. The shadow of Rick and Margaret no longer lingered over me. I woke each morning with purpose, not dread. The past was behind me, and the future was finally mine, to shape. My publishing house, Sterling Press, was growing faster than I had expected. What started as a dream with 2 assistants had turned into a thriving small business. We published translations of European literature that larger houses ignored. Our books began to attract attention. Reviewers praised the quality, and readers appreciated stories that felt fresh and timeless. One afternoon, I sat in our office, flipping through the first hardback copy of our newest release. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the pages. To me, this book was more than paper and ink. It was proof that I could create something lasting on my own. Rachel walked in carrying 2 coffees. She set one down on my desk and smiled. Your name is on the back cover. Grace, publisher. How does it feel? I laughed softly. Strange, but good. For years I thought my identity was tied to being Rick's wife. Now I realize I can stand on my own. She lifted her cup to standing tall. We clinked our cups together. Outside of work, my life had also begun to blossom. I spent weekends in Miami Beach, soaking in the sun from the balcony of my condo. I hosted small gatherings with friends, filled with laughter and music. For the first time in decades, I was building connections that were based on honesty, not appearances. One evening, as I watched the ocean waves roll onto the shore, I thought about how different I felt. I was not driven by anger anymore. I did not want revenge. What I wanted was peace, and I had found it. Rick, on the other hand, was sinking deeper into obscurity. Word spread that he was driving a taxi full-time. Former colleagues avoided him. Tiffany had long since vanished into her new marriage. Margaret sold her jewelry to cover expenses, and they both lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Sometimes I wondered if he thought of me. Did he regret it? Did he replay that night at the Mayflower Hotel and wish he had chosen differently? I never asked. His life no longer concerned me. One morning, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from Rick. Grace, I do not expect forgiveness. The letter said, I only want you to know I see now what I threw away. You were the best part of my life, and I was too blind to see it. I am sorry. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. I felt no anger, no joy, just closure. The past had spoken, and I did not need to answer. My true answers came in the form of progress. Sterling Press expanded into digital formats, reaching readers overseas. We hired 2 more editors, and our catalog doubled. Young writers began submitting manuscripts to us, hoping we would take a chance on them. I saw in their faces the same hunger I once felt, the hunger to be seen and heard. At one launch event, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. Your story gave me strength, she said. When I read about what happened to you, I left my cheating husband. I realized I deserved better." Her words shook me. I had never set out to be a symbol. Yet here I was, standing in front of someone who had changed her life because I had refused to be broken. Driving home that night, I realized something important. The scandal had not defined me. My choices had. Choosing to fight, to tell the truth, to build something new. That was my legacy. I still kept in touch with Monique. She remained my legal guide, but also became a friend again. One evening over dinner, she smiled at me. "You know, Grace, I think your story belongs in a book. Women everywhere could learn from it." I laughed. "I am a publisher, not an author. Maybe you can be both," she said. Her words stayed with me. I began to consider writing my own account, not to relive the pain, but to show that even betrayal can lead to renewal. Life had taught me a simple truth. Trusting others is a risk, but trusting yourself is survival. For too long, I had forgotten how strong I was. Now, every morning, I reminded myself that my worth was not tied to anyone else. On the first anniversary of my company's founding, I hosted a small celebration. My staff, friends, and Rachel gathered in the office with cake and champagne. I looked around the room at the laughter and the light and felt a wave of gratitude. "This is just the beginning," I told them. "We built this from nothing, and we will keep building, not because we are trying to prove anyone wrong, but because we believe in ourselves." The applause filled the room, and I felt tears sting my eyes. Not of sadness, but of joy. As I blew out the candles on the cake, I made a silent wish. Not for revenge, not for more wealth, but for continued courage to live my life with honesty and strength. That wish, I realized, had already come true. A full year passed since the night of the anniversary party. Looking back, it felt like a different lifetime. I was no longer the quiet wife sitting in the shadows of her husband's ambition. I was the woman who stood up, spoke the truth, and walked away free. Life had reshaped itself in remarkable ways. Sterling Press was thriving. Our small catalog had grown into a steady line of releases. Readers followed us. Bookstores carried our titles, and young translators sent us their work, hoping we would take a chance on them. Each book we published felt like planting a seed, and the garden was blooming. On a warm spring morning, I sat at my desk with the windows open, letting in the smell of lilacs from the street below. The office was alive with chatter. My assistants discussed a new manuscript in one corner, while our editor reviewed proofs at her desk. For the first time in decades, I felt I was part of something that mattered. Rachel visited often. She remained my closest friend, cheering each milestone. Over coffee one afternoon, she said, "Grace, do you realize you are an inspiration now? Women quote you in online forums. Your story is being shared around the world." I shook my head with a laugh. I never meant to be anyone's symbol. I only wanted to survive. Survival became strength. She replied. Strength became a message. You do not get to choose when people see you as a light. Her words humbled me. I also began speaking at small community events. Book clubs invited me to talk not only about publishing but also about resilience. I told them the same thing every time. Betrayal does not define you, but how you rise after it does. Meanwhile, Rick had disappeared from most people's lives. Word reached me that he was still driving a taxi. Margaret lived with him in their small apartment. They were no longer the powerful pair who looked down on me. They were ordinary, struggling, and bitter. One evening, as I left a bookstore event, I saw him across the street. He stood beside his cab, waiting for a passenger. His hair was thin, his face worn. For a moment our eyes met. He looked away first. I kept walking. My heart felt no anger, only distance. He belonged to another story, not mine. At night in my Miami condo, I often stood on the balcony watching the waves. The ocean became my reminder that life is constant change. Storms come, tides shift, but the horizon always waits. In that steady rhythm, I found peace. I also thought often of Aunt Josephine. Her inheritance had not only saved me financially but given me the freedom to pursue my dreams. I wished I could tell her that her legacy lived on, not in material wealth, but in courage. By the second spring after the scandal, Sterling Press hosted its first literary festival. We gathered authors, translators, and readers in a sunlit hall. Seeing the room full of people moved me deeply. I gave a short speech at the opening. Stories save us, I told the audience. They remind us that pain can become wisdom and endings can become beginnings. I stand here not because my life was easy, but because I chose to keep writing my own story. The applause that followed was not for me alone, but for everyone who had ever stood back up after being broken. Later that evening, Rachel pulled me aside. "Grace, you know what this means. You have built not only a business but a community. People are here because of you." I smiled at her. "Then let us keep building." The night ended with laughter, books signed, and plans for the future. As I walked home through the quiet streets, I realized something had shifted inside me. I no longer defined myself by survival or even resilience. I defined myself by creation. Rick's name had faded from public memory. My name was now attached to books, to stories, to courage. The balance of power had turned completely. When I returned to the condo, I brewed a cup of tea and stepped onto the balcony. The city lights shimmered in the distance. The ocean whispered below, and I felt whole. A year earlier, I had thought the end of my marriage was the end of me. But endings are deceptive. Sometimes they are beginnings in disguise. As I sipped my tea, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I would never again let anyone define my worth. I would trust myself, build my own life, and share that light with others. The night was calm, and for the first time in decades, so was I. 2 years after the anniversary scandal, I woke one morning to a headline that caught my eye. Former executive declares bankruptcy. Beneath the title was Rick's name. I sat at my kitchen table, the Miami sun streaming through the windows, and read the article slowly. His debts had overtaken him. Loans, unpaid taxes, and legal fees left him with nothing. The article said he had sold his car, his suits, even his wedding ring. He and Margaret were living in a rundown building on the edge of the city. I set the paper down and let out a long breath. It was not triumph I felt. It was closure. In those same 2 years, my life had flourished. Sterling Press had doubled in size. We had 3 offices now: Washington, Miami, and New York. Our books were winning awards, and young writers called me their mentor. What Rick tried to take from me had instead turned into the foundation of something strong. I remembered the woman I used to be, the one who smiled quietly while others spoke over her. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who owned her choices, her voice, and her future. One afternoon, as I walked through a bookstore in New York, I saw a display featuring our newest titles. My name, publisher, Grace Mitchell, appeared on each back cover. A young woman browsing the shelves noticed me. "Are you Grace Mitchell?" she asked. "Yes," I said, surprised. Her eyes lit up. "Your story changed my life. I left a relationship that was tearing me down because I heard what you did. Thank you for being brave." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you for reminding me why I told the truth." That moment meant more than any profit or award. It was proof that pain can be transformed into light for someone else. Meanwhile, Rick's story was fading. Friends told me he was often seen sitting outside the courthouse, head bowed, waiting for hearings. Margaret, once so proud, walked with a cane and avoided neighbors. They had become invisible in a city where reputation once defined them. One evening, as I left a speaking event, I saw Rick again. He was thinner, his suit frayed, his face marked by time. He looked at me with tired eyes. "Grace," he said softly. I paused. "Yes, I do not expect forgiveness," he whispered, "but I want you to know I understand now. I traded everything for greed. You deserve better. I ruined the best years of our lives." His words hung in the cool night air. For a moment, I searched his face, looking for the man I once married. He was gone. What remained was only regret. "I wish you peace, Rick," I said finally. "But peace comes only when we face ourselves." I walked away, not out of anger, but because his story no longer touched mine. At home that night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. The city stretched out before me, lights flickering like stars. I thought of the path that had brought me here. Betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak, yet also truth, courage, and renewal. I realized something simple but powerful. Life will test you in ways you never expect. People will betray you, and storms will break what you thought was unshakable. But you always have a choice. You can let it destroy you, or you can use it to rebuild yourself. I had chosen to rebuild. The next morning, I met Rachel for breakfast. She hugged me tightly. "Grace, you look lighter these days. Like you finally closed the book." I smiled. "I did. Rick's chapter is over. Mine is still being written." She raised her coffee cup. "To new chapters." I clinked my cup against hers. "To new chapters." That night, back in Miami, I opened my journal and wrote a single line. The end of us was the beginning of me. I closed the book and felt the calm of completion. Rick's story ended in loss. Mine continued in hope. And as I drifted to sleep, I knew the best chapters of my life were still ahead. 1 year later, I stood in the middle of my publishing house, Sterling Press, watching the team celebrate our newest release. The office smelled of fresh coffee and ink, the kind of scent that reminded me of beginnings. We had grown from a handful of passionate editors into a respected name in the industry. Authors who once doubted themselves now saw their books on shelves across the country. I had become not just a publisher, but a mentor to young writers who needed someone to believe in them. Sometimes I thought back to the woman I was before, quiet, careful, afraid of breaking the peace even when I was breaking inside. That woman no longer existed. I had chosen to build something new, not out of bitterness, but out of hope. At a conference in New York, a young woman approached me after my speech. She held my book with trembling hands. "Grace," she said softly, "I was in a marriage where I felt invisible. Hearing your story gave me courage to leave. Now I'm finishing my first novel. Thank you." Her words filled me with a gratitude deeper than anything money could buy. My pain had become her hope. My choice to speak had given her a voice. That, more than anything, was the legacy I wanted to leave. At night, when I sat on my balcony, overlooking Miami's ocean skyline, I felt peace. The past no longer haunted me. Rick's story was finished. Mine had only begun. I realized the truth again. Life will not always give you what you dream of, but it will always give you the chance to rise. And when you rise, others rise with you. If you felt connected to my journey, I invite you to stay close to this community. This channel is built for those who love her true stories, because real life often speaks louder than fiction. Every week we share her true stories that inspire strength, courage, and dignity. By subscribing, you'll never miss the next chapter of her true stories that might reflect your own life. Join us, add your voice, and help spread her true stories so others know they are not alone. And if today's story touched you, remember, there will always be more her true stories waiting for you here,